Welcome, students. Today we're learning about graphing points from a table. So let's just do a little bit of review about graphing. Now you'll recall from our last couple graphing lessons that a graph has two axes. An axis is a direction. This axis is called the x-axis. It runs from left to right. This axis is called the y-axis. It runs up and down. Today, we're going to learn about how we can use data or information in a table. That's what this is called here, a table. It's a way of storing information. We're going to learn about how we can take information from a table like this and add it to a graph like this. So to begin with, let's go ahead and I'm going to color code our axes just to make some things very clear here. So let's start by color coding the x-axis red. If I move up here, I see that my table has some information, some numbers. 0, 1, 2, 3. Let's see, what is this graph about anyways? This graph, it's about time since a party began and how much fruit punch is left. Now let's just imagine for a moment that people are at a party. Maybe it's somebody's birthday party. Now the longer that people are at the birthday party, the more fruit punch that they drink. So if we start out with 8 quarts of fruit punch, the longer the party goes, the less fruit punch there is. A minute ago, I highlighted the x-axis red. I'm going to do the same thing up here. I'm going to highlight this information red. This is the information that we're going to put on the x-axis. You'll notice that it says up here, time since party began. And if I come down here, I see the same information, the time since the party began. So here's 0, that's when the party starts. The further we go on the x-axis, the longer the party has been going on. Imagine if you'd been at a birthday party for 10 hours. That would be a very long time. Now, we have another axis as well. It's this y-axis here. And this represents the fruit punch that's left. The fruit punch that's left. So maybe when we start, we have a lot of fruit punch, like 8 quarts of it. And the longer the party goes, bloop, 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 the less fruit punch we have. Let's use a different color for our fruit punch. We'll use green for our fruit punch. Okay, so this is our y-axis, up and down. We're going to color this green just to make it really clear what we're talking about. Okay, so we're going to graph points from our table. And you've noticed we've labeled this as x and this as y. So let's start with our x-axis. And we're going to look at this first point here, 0 on the x-axis. A 0 on the x-axis. Here's the x-axis here. Here's 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there is 0 right there. Now before we move on, we're going to come over here and look at this part of the table, the y-axis, and I see an 8 here. So remember, the y-axis is up and down. So we're just going to start with this first part of the table here. And I see that there's a 0 in the x-axis and 0 in the x-axis and an 8 in the y-axis. Let's graph this on our table. So starting on my x down here, and I'm at 0 over here. Now I'm going to count up 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is the first point on my graph. I'm going to mark it right now with my pencil. There we go. So 0, 8 up here shows up on my graph right here. Let's move on to the next part of my table. This next part here. So when we're working with a table like this, we're just going to do one row at a time. So this shows 1 on the x-axis, 6 on the y-axis. So let's start with the x-axis. X always comes first because it goes X, Y, Z. X comes first in the alphabet. So this shows a 1 on the X-axis. So I'm going to start here at 0. I'm going to go over to 1. There's 1. And then I'm going to count up 6. There's that 6 up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That is the point. It's at 1 and 6. I'm going to mark it with my pencil here. There we go. All right, let's move on to the next row of my graph. There it is. All right, what points do we see here? I see a 2 and a 4. So I'm going to start down here at 0 and count over 1, 2. Remember, I always do my X first. Then I count up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There is my point, 2, 4. And that brings me to my last row, which is right here. 3, 2. All right, so starting at 0 here rather, and then counting over to 3. 1, 2, 3, and now counting up 2. 1, 2. There's my last point. There we have it. So I have my 4 points. If you wanted to be really fancy, and it's just kind of a cool thing to notice, if I draw a line here that goes through them, you'll notice that that line intersects, it hits all of the points that I drew. And what is this graph telling us? This graph is telling us that the longer the party goes on, the less fruit punch there is in the punch bowl. All right, so that is how we graph a coordinate point. You can pause here if you're ready to go to the IXL. If you want to continue, I'm going to go ahead and do another problem that you can do with me and do a little bit more practice.